What do we mean by pattern? Pattern, a spatial or temporal arrangement of separate elements to make a complex whole. I mean one gestalt. What about the recognition? The definition of recognition. Recognition, a sense of awareness and familiarity experienced when one encounters people, events, or objects that have been encountered before, or when one comes up on material that has been learned in the past. A concept related to recognition also is comprehension. Comprehension, and also it is one component of the intelligence. Comprehension is the act or capability of understanding something, especially the meaning of a communication. So we have overlap between comprehension and understanding. One component is one component in intelligence is your planning ability. What's the meaning of plan or planning ability? In cognitive psychology, it is a according to cognitive psychology, it is a mental representation of an intended action that guides the individual in carrying it out. So, in order to carry it out, you should have a plan and you should have a planning ability. Using language is considered a part of intelligence. So, what do we mean by language? We have some definitions for language. One of them, it says a system for expressing or communicating thoughts and feelings through speech, sounds, or written symbols. You have to understand fair enough the meaning of language in order to be able to reproduce it, to recreate it in artificial intelligence. Language is a specific communicative system used by a particular group of speakers with its distinctive vocabulary, grammar, and phonological systems. And it could also be it could also be defi- it could also be defined as but in that case it will be body language, not language. It is non-verbal means of communication such as sign language or the languages used in the computer programming. And it is a way to communicate and to transfer or for transmission of information using either verbal language or non-verbal language. Communication is one marker or one factors included in the intelligence, and it is an indicator of highly intelligent individuals. What is the meaning of communication? Communication is the transmission of information by verbal means such as oral or written language, and also it could be by non-verbal means using symbols, signals, or any something like that. But you don't in nonverbal, in nonverbal communication, you don't use language, either oral or written language. And as you know, humans communicate to relate to each other, to exchange ideas, knowledge, feelings, experiences, and for interpersonal social purposes. One may ask about non human animals. Are they able to communicate? The answer is yes, but they communicate vocally or non vocally for a variety or purposes. So yes, they use language, includes vocal sounds. One more core element in intelligence is your ability to learn. Of course, high degree of ability to learn is related to high intelligence, or it is considered as an indicator of highly intelligent people, that they able to learn. This is an indicator of intelligence. What do we mean by learning? The acquisition of novel information, behaviors, abilities after practice, observation, or other experiences. So you can learn from your experiences as evidenced by a change in behavior. So in learning, we should have a change in, and it should be not temporary change, but permanent, a change in our behavior, knowledge, or even brain function. Also, learning can be defined as a relatively permanent change in behavior as a result of practice or training. And whenever we are talking about permanent, we mean not temporary state of changes. It lasts or intended to last for uh, uh, indefinite time and remain unchanged indefinitely. And whenever we talk about a change, so maybe it will be positive learning or negative learning. And learning involves learning as a process, as a cognitive process, involves number one, consciously or non-consciously attending. So we have attention, it is a core element in learning process, to attending to relevant aspects of incoming information. Number two, mentally organizing the information into a coherent cognitive representation. So organization of the incoming information, it is a core element in learning processing. Take care and always try to relate this to the machine and artificial intelligence for machines. Number three, learning process involves integrating this information, incoming information, with relevant existing knowledge activated from long-term memory. So long-term memory, what we learned, and now it is on our long-term memory. We have to integrate this with the new incoming information. So in learning process, we have three main components. Number one, consciously or non-consciously attending to relevant aspects of incoming information. Number two, you have to organize the information into a coherent cognitive representation. Number three, you have to integrate this new incoming information with relevant existing knowledge activated from long-term memory. And of course, deep learning, which is also referred to as deep neural learning or deep neural network, which is a subset of machine learning, I think it is relevant to what is mentioned here about learning process.
Ever wondered how Google translates an entire web page to a different language in a matter of seconds? Or your phone gallery groups images based on their location? All of this is a product of deep learning. But what exactly is deep learning? Deep learning is a subset of machine learning, which in turn is a subset of artificial intelligence. Artificial intelligence is a technique that enables a machine to mimic human behavior. Machine learning is a technique to achieve AI through algorithms trained with data. And finally, deep learning is a type of machine learning inspired by the structure of the human brain. In terms of deep learning, this structure is called an artificial neural network. Let's understand deep learning better and how it's different from machine learning. Say we create a machine that could differentiate between tomatoes and cherries. If done using machine learning, we'd have to tell the machine the features based on which the two can be differentiated. These features could be the size and the type of stem on them. With deep learning, on the other hand, the features are picked out by the neural network without human intervention. Of course, that kind of independence comes at the cost of having a much higher volume of data to train our machine. Now, let's dive into the working of neural networks. Here, we have 3 students. Each of them write down the digit 9 on a piece of paper. Notably, they don't all write it identically. The human brain can easily recognize the digits. But what if a computer had to recognize them? That's where deep learning comes in. Here's a neural network trained to identify handwritten digits. Each number is present as an image of 28 times 28 pixels. Now, that amounts to a total of 784 pixels. Neurons, the core entity of a neural network, is where the information processing takes place. Each of the 784 pixels is fed to a neuron in the first layer of our neural network. This forms the input layer. On the other end, we have the output layer, with each neuron representing a digit with the hidden layers existing between them. The information is transferred from one layer to another over connecting channels. Each of these has a value attached to it, and hence is called a weighted channel. All neurons have a unique number associated with it called bias. This bias is added to the weighted sum of inputs reaching the neuron, which is then applied to a function known as the activation function. The result of the activation function determines if the neuron gets activated. Every activated neuron passes on information to the following layers. This continues up till the second last layer. The one neuron activated in the output layer corresponds to the input digit. The weights and bias are continuously adjusted to produce a well-trained network. So, where is deep learning applied? In customer support. When most people converse with customer support agents, the conversation seems so real, they don't even realize that it's actually a bot on the other side. In medical care, neural networks detect cancer cells and analyze MRI images to give detailed results. Self-driving cars. What seemed like science fiction is now a reality. Apple, Tesla, and Nissan are only a few of the companies working on self-driving cars. So, deep learning has a vast scope, but it too faces some limitations. The first, as we discussed earlier, is data. While deep learning is the most efficient way to deal with unstructured data, a neural network requires a massive volume of data to train. Let's assume we always have access to the necessary amount of data. Processing this is not within the capability of every machine. And that brings us to our second limitation: computational power. Training a neural network requires graphical processing units. which have thousands of cores as compared to CPUs. And GPUs are, of course, more expensive. And finally, we come down to training time. Deep neural networks take hours or even months to train. The time increases with the amount of data and number of layers in the network. So, here's a short quiz for you. Arrange the following statements in order to describe the working of a neural network. A. The bias is added. B. The weighted sum of the inputs is calculated. C. Specific neuron is activated. D. The result is fed to an activation function. Leave your answers in the comments section below. 3 of you stand a chance to win Amazon vouchers, so hurry! Some of the popular deep learning frameworks include TensorFlow, PyTorch, Keras, Deep Learning 4J, Caffe, and Microsoft Cognitive Toolkit. Considering the future predictions for deep learning and AI, we seem to have only scratched the surface. In fact, Horus Technology is working on a device for the blind that uses deep learning with computer vision to describe the world to the users. Replicating the human mind at the entirety may be not just an episode of science fiction for too long. The future is indeed full of surprises. And that is deep learning for you in short. If you enjoyed this video, do like and share it. Also, subscribe to our channel if you haven't yet, as we have a lot more exciting videos coming up. Fun learning till then.
Do you remember when we mentioned some about the types of problem, and we said we have 3 types of problems: simple, compound, and complex problems. And as we said before, simple and compound problem can be solved by standard approach, but the complex problems are dynamic in its nature, so we cannot solve them without developing new knowledge or new skills. And I asked you which kind of problems the robot or the machine can deal with. It is very easy for the machine to deal with simple and compound problem, but in the case of complex problem, in order to be able to deal with complex problems, the machine should have deep learning. Deep learning, in brief, as you can figure out from the previous video, it is also referred to as neural learning or deep neural network, and it is a subset of machine learning, and it is an artificial intelligence or AI function that imitates the workings of the human brain in processing data and creating patterns for use in decision making. And because it is a subset of machine learning of a subset of machine learning and artificial intelligence, it has networks capable of learning unsupervised from the data, and you have to underline the word unsupervised, and that is unstructured or unlabeled. So depending on deep learning, I think the machine will be able to deal with the complex problem. In our previous definition of intelligence, we said intelligence enable humans to interact with the environment, to experience stimuli, and to think. What is the meaning of thinking? Thinking, it is a cognitive behavior in which it is cognitive behavior in which sorry it is cognitive behavior in which ideas, images, mental representations, or other hypothetical elements of thought are experienced or manipulated. It is the way that you experience and manipulate ideas, images, mental representation, elements of thought, and so on. And thinking include imagination, remembering, problem solving, daydreaming, free association, concept formation, and many other processes. Also, thinking has two main characteristics. Number one, it is covert. It is not overt behavior, so it is not directly observable. It must be inferred from actions or self-reports. So we have to infer it from overt behavior. Overt behavior cover three main subtypes. Overt cover three main subtypes, including motor activities, including fine motor activities and gross motor activities, non-verbal communication, expressing yourself without using language, and verbal communication in which you use language. So we can infer the covert behavior and thinking one of these covert behaviors from actions or server reports or overt behavior. But thinking itself is not directly observable, it is indirectly observable. The second main characteristic of thinking is that it is symbolic. So it involves operations on mental symbols or representations. We have mental or cognitive representations in our mind. The nature of this representation remains not clear enough, and we have a debate about that. So we have two main characteristics of thinking. Number one, it is covered, and number two, it involves operations on mental symbols or representation. What about cognitive process? In our definition to thinking, we said cognitive behavior. What is the meaning of cognitive behavior or cognitive process? Cognitive process, this term is often used synonymously with mental process, so we can use them interchangeably, cognitive process and mental process. So cognitive process can be used synonymously with mental process. And we can define cognitive process as any of the mental functions assumed to be involved in the acquisition, storage, interpretation, manipulation, transformation, and use language. Theory of mind, which becomes more relevant to artificial intelligence now, and you, as a professional in artificial intelligence, and it is your major, you should be acquainted with the meaning of theory of mind. But theory of mind is considered as a hot cognition. What do we mean by hot cognition?